I was already halfway to my car when I noticed an ordinary shopping cart parked crookedly at the edge of the lot. The wheels were slightly turned, as if someone had left it there in a hurry. Nothing unusual until I noticed movement inside. There lay a puppy, a small German shepherd, probably about 4 months old. He was curled up in the corner of the cart, as if he did not want anyone to notice him. His fur was tangled and dusty. His ears seemed too big for his head, and his paws were tightly tucked under him. But what struck me the most was he was holding a plush blue elephant in his teeth, missing one ear. The puppy did not bark or move. He just looked at me with wide, deep brown eyes. It was as if he was still waiting, hoping that someone would come back for him. I looked around. People were walking by, loading groceries, laughing, talking on their phones. No one paid any attention to him. No one even glanced down. It was as if he did not exist. I slowly approached. My heart was already pounding. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. He tensed up, clutching the toy even tighter, but he did not flinch. The closer I got, the more I realized that he was not just lying there. He was guarding that toy, as if it was all he had left. I crouched down next to the cart. We just stared at each other for a while. I did not reach out to him. I just sat there, letting him know that I was not a threat. Minutes passed. I lost track of how many. And then I did something I had not planned. I sat down right there on the warm asphalt of the parking lot, next to the cart. We waited. The sun was beating down on the back of my head, but I did not move. He did not take his eyes off me, barely blinking, as if he was still trying to figure out whether it was safe to be near me. I was not trying to scare him away. I was simply there, standing beside him while cars drove past and people walked by. None of them seemed to notice us, and if they did, they showed no interest. At one point, a woman with 2 children noticed us. A little girl tugged at her mother's hand and pointed at the puppy. "Look, Mommy, what a puppy," she said. But the mother only glanced briefly and said, "Do not touch him," and led her daughter away. The puppy did not react to their departure. He simply clutched the toy even tighter. I inspected the cart to see if there was a note, a collar, or anything else, but I found only the puppy, the toy, and a few crumbs at the bottom of the metal basket. That was when I decided to help him. I pulled out half of my turkey and cheese sandwich from my bag. I tore off a small piece and placed it on the sidewalk next to the cart. The puppy did not move. He only sniffed the air and stared at me until I stepped back a little and looked away. Soon I heard a faint rustling, and when I looked back, the food was gone. The toy was still clutched in his mouth, and time seemed to slow down. I had not planned to sit there for hours, but I could not leave while he was still waiting. I kept hoping that someone would show up, that I would hear footsteps and a voice calling out for help. But the parking lot grew quieter, the shadows grew longer, and no one came. When the streetlights flickered on, I looked at him and whispered, "I do not think they are coming back." His ears twitched, and for a moment he loosened his grip on the toy. That was enough. I reached out my hand again, at this time slower, and touched the edge of the cart with my fingertips. But he did not pull away, and he did not growl. He just looked at me, and I swear in that gaze I saw something that shattered my hope. Not something joyful, but something heartbreaking, the kind of thing you cling to when deep down you already know the truth. I slowly stood up, trying not to scare him, and opened the back door of my car. I grabbed an old fleece blanket I kept there mostly for rescue missions like this and returned to him. Carefully, I folded the blanket and placed it inside the cart like a little bed. Then I stepped back again. All of this, the whole time, he watched me while I stayed silent. After a minute, he shifted slightly, then placed the blue elephant next to him, touched the blanket with his paw, sniffed it once, and looked back at me. I kept my hands open and visible, palms up, and my heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. He stepped onto the blanket. Not fully, just with one paw, then the other. After hesitating, he sat down right there on that old fleece, curling up next to the elephant, as if it was the only thing he had ever known. I knew what this was. This was my chance. I moved, carefully wrapping him in the blanket, like a cocoon. He did not resist or whimper. He just let me do what I wanted. When I pulled him out of the cart, I expected him to squirm or panic, but instead he buried his head in my chin. His body was shaking, but not from the cold, from exhaustion. I placed him on the back seat, still holding the toy in his mouth. I sat in the driver's seat, and for a while I just sat there, hands resting on the wheel, not starting the car. I just breathed and tried to process what had just happened. I looked into the rearview mirror. He was looking back at me, silently, not barking or crying. He just seemed to be asking, "Is this real? Are you really taking me home, or is this just another stop on the long journey to being left behind?" I turned the key. "You will not be going back," I whispered quietly, meaning never. On the way home, it was silent. He did not make a sound, did not move. He just sat, curled up comfortably on the back seat, and we stared at each other without looking away. Outside, the world, every red light, seemed like an eternity. I kept looking back, almost expecting him to disappear, as if all of this was some fragile dream I could wake up from. When we pulled up to my house, I turned off the engine and froze for a moment. My heart was still pounding, but it was not fear. It was something deeper, something I had never noticed before. For a long time, it had never occurred to me that I was about to change someone's life, or perhaps even my own. I opened the back door, crouched down, and reached out my hand. He was still lying there, curled up, and the blue elephant was pressed tightly against his chest. I whispered, "Come here, buddy." He blinked, and to my surprise, slowly stood up, swaying a little but walking confidently. I stepped back, and he followed me. I laid the blanket on the floor in the living room and placed a bowl of water next to it. He cautiously approached, sniffed the water, drank, then sat down. I quietly moved around the room, giving him space. He did not bark or whine, he just watched me. That night I barely slept, lying on the couch, hearing the sound of his breathing just a few feet away from me. From time to time, I peeked over the edge to check if he was still there. Each time, I found that he was also watching me, as if neither of us could believe that this was really happening. Around 3 a.m., I heard a soft tap. Turning my head, I saw him beside the couch. He had the toy in his mouth and was looking up at me. He carefully placed it down, then curled up on the floor, pressing his back against the couch as if he needed to be close enough to know that I wouldn't leave. I whispered, "I'm here." He closed his eyes and, for the first time since I had found him, quietly sighed. Slowly morning came and soft golden light filtered through the blinds. I opened my eyes and the first thing I saw was him, still curled up on the couch with his head resting on his paws. Next to him, as a silent promise, lay the blue elephant. He looked peaceful, as though sleep had finally found him after days of waiting. I tried not to wake him and quietly went to the kitchen. I poured dry food into his bowl and reheated the chicken I had left from the night before. When I came back, he was sitting and watching me, not scared, not impatient, just waiting to see what I would do next. He approached the bowl, stepped back, sniffed it once or twice, then took a bite. Carefully, politely, as if unsure whether he was allowed to eat, my throat tightened. He ate slowly, chewing each piece as if it could be his last. He could have spoken, but it seemed he already understood what I had told him about the shelter. I had spoken of how people sometimes abandon dogs for unknown reasons and that I hadn't planned to bring them home, but at some point he changed everything. While I was talking, he slowly approached me. His paws barely made a sound. When he finally got close, he didn't jump, lick, or wag his tail. He simply pressed his head gently against my leg. I froze, then carefully placed my hand on his back. His fur was rough but warm, and I whispered, "Now you're safe." He stayed there for a long time without making a sound, not chasing his tail, not showing wild energy. There was a quiet unity, as if, for the first time in his short life, he felt he was no longer alone. Over the next few days, we gradually established a certain rhythm. He followed me from room to room, always just a few steps behind. If I stopped, he stopped too, and when I sat down, he would lie next to me. He didn't seek attention, didn't demand anything, just quietly watched and waited. His toy was always nearby. I started calling him Cart, and although it wasn't the most clever or affectionate name, it stuck with him. Every time I said his name, his ears would perk up slightly. I would say, "Hey, Cart," and he would lift his head as if to say, "I am here." At night, he slept on the couch, and during the day, he would curl up by my desk while I worked on paperwork for the volunteer shelter. Sometimes I noticed him standing by the door, just sitting there, staring, as if still waiting for someone to come through and call his name. I did not try to change him, did not rush him. I let him be himself, a boy with a past I could not understand and a heart that was still learning to trust. But then something happened that changed everything. One afternoon, a friend of mine, a social worker who helped coordinate therapy visits with local shelters, came to visit. She had come to distribute some flyers, and when she stepped into the wagon, he froze, his whole body tensed. I was just about to step in when she slowly knelt down, carefully avoiding direct eye contact with him. "Here," she said quietly. "You must be the bravest one." He did not move at first, but then he slowly approached her, lowered his head and lowered his shoulders, and gently pressed his nose into her palm. She stayed silent for a moment, then looked at me. "He is special," she said. Truly special, I thought, though I had already known that. That night, I could not stop thinking about her words. Special. That word echoed in my mind as I watched Cart curled up next to his toy. I had always thought he resembled the elephant, and it occurred to me that maybe he was meant for something more than just survival. Maybe he was made for healing. The next morning, I called her and asked what was needed to have a pet evaluated for therapeutic work. She sent me a list of trainings and programs, and I read every word. I was not sure if he could handle all of it. He was still so quiet and uncertain about the world. But deep down, I felt that he had a special gift. The way he met pain, how he stayed close without trying to take the center of attention. Some dogs barked, some jumped. Some demanded that love be offered loudly to the world, but we were starting slowly. Cart went through training in listening, leash walking, and learning to sit on command. The trainer came to us once a week, and Cart quickly got used to her. He did not bark or show fear. He was simply calm. The trainer was amazed that Cart did not behave like a typical rescue dog. She said he acted as if he had been waiting for these weeks to come. Cart received his certification, and I filled out all the necessary paperwork to register him in the local assistance program. We had our first visit scheduled with a children's support group at the center in the city. We were going to visit children who had lost their parents, brothers, or sisters. Some of them were barely able to speak. I admit I was very nervous, not knowing how Cart would react to this place. I was afraid he might feel overwhelmed. However, when we entered the room, I saw something change in him. He perked up his ears, lifted his head, and without hesitation walked straight over to the smallest girl in the circle. She was about 7 years old and was holding a stuffed fox in her hands. Her eyes were hidden behind a curtain of hair. Cart sat down beside her without moving or blinking. He sat so still until she reached out and touched his head. Just a little. but she smiled. After that first visit, everything changed. Cart stopped being just a puppy I had rescued. He became something more, a quiet strength that was always present where the pain was deeper than most people could bear. Carrie West began visiting hospitals, schools, and nursing homes every week. He always entered those places slowly and respectfully, never rushing or barking. His purpose was to find those who needed his presence the most. One day, he met a boy around 10 years old who had not spoken since his parents died in a car accident. Carrie approached the boy, sat down beside him, and placed his toy elephant at the boy's feet. No one had ever seen the boy cry, but that day he cried silently. And it meant everything to him. Cart stayed by his side the whole time, and people began to call us teachers, counselors, and parents who needed not just a therapy dog, but a true friend. They wanted him, but despite all of this, Cart did not change. He still slept curled up by my bed, still followed me from room to room, and sometimes glanced at the door as if part of him kept wondering whether someone from his past might return. But now I know better. Some stories do not need to be told. Some wounds do not require explanations to heal. He had found his purpose, and now I had found mine. It was the one visit I would never forget. It was a shelter for teens who grew up without parental care. Most of them had endured more than I could ever imagine: abuse, neglect, abandonment, the kind of pain that hardens the heart and makes it hard to believe in coincidences. Cart entered, as always, calm and focused, but that day everything was different. The room felt heavier, and there was a challenge in their eyes, as if they were pushing him to a test. One teenager, about 16 years old, sat in the corner with his hood up, arms tightly crossed over his chest. I could feel the anger radiating from him like heat. He didn't want us to be there, didn't trust the place, and didn't want our presence. Cart walked past, but everyone else headed straight toward him. The boy didn't move, and Cart sat down and waited. A few minutes passed, and then Cart did something I had never seen before. He took his blue elephant. I pulled out from the cart the only toy he had kept since the day I found him, and carefully placed it on the table. Silence fell over the room. The boy stared intently at the toy, then at the cart. His hands fell to his knees, and for the first time his face softened a little. "Did you leave this for me?" he quietly asked. Cart didn't move, but I noticed how his tail softly tapped against the floor. The boy leaned over, took the toy, and pushed back his hood. Tears filled his eyes. "I had one just like this when I was little," he whispered. Cart leaned in, but the boy didn't pull away. He allowed him to that night when we got home. At home, the cart was as quiet as always, but this time his condition seemed even heavier. He curled up by the door, not in his usual spot. He sat in the same place, staring at the floor as if remembering something. Only he could see that the elephant wasn't with him. When we were leaving, I found him hiding under the boy's chair. I thought about taking him and returning him, but I couldn't figure out where I knew that the cart was meant for him to keep it. It was no longer just a toy, it was a gift, a bridge between two broken parts of my life. I sat next to him on the floor and ran my hand along his back. "You worked well today," I whispered. "You always do." He didn't look at me, but after a moment, "Rest. Even when you are silent, you are still here, offering your comfort." From that day on, he never took the elephant in his hands again. He stayed with the boy, and together we moved forward, visiting one place after another. He gave a piece of himself to those who needed it most, in silent solace, in constant presence, in the reminder that even when you are struggling, there is always someone who will stay by your side. Connection, a bond that transcends neglect and abandonment. Even when forgotten and discarded in a shopping cart, where nothing remains but a broken toy, you are not broken. In reality, you are just waiting to be seen. I still remember the day I found him, the cart, the broken toy, and his eyes full of questions, hope, and pain. I often think about how easy it would have been to walk by and tell myself that someone else could help, that it wasn't my responsibility. But I couldn't walk away, and I became a witness to a rare phenomenon. Not just survival, but true resilience, transformation. Cart not only saved himself, but also became a true hero, saving others quietly and gently, asking for nothing in return. He reminded me that the smallest actions of a person near us can not only save but also change the world. By the side of someone who gives gifts and speaks a language that doesn't require words, he felt special. He had never known his name before and wasn't sure if anyone would ever come back for him, but he still waited. And when that didn't happen, I realized that these dogs don't wait for perfection. They don't harbor malice. They just want someone to choose them. If you hear this and your heart stirs, find your car. He is waiting for you in the parking lot, behind the fence, or at the shelter, where there are too many people and too much noise. He clings to hope with both paws. And perhaps you will be the one to give it to him. Perhaps you will be the one who stays with him, because sometimes in saving them, we save ourselves.